Order, I believe it's right, 6 right on the button. Roll call, Sheila?
Yep. Robert Shea. Hans Petcher. Mark Strong.
Here.
Heidi Nightingale. Elaine Daly. Tricia Kerr. Christina Calarco. Here. Michael Didio.
Mike should be on the video. Nothing reported tonight. I'm going to open the public hearing. I got 6:03. 51. If you wish to speak at the public hearing regarding a local law authorizing the sale of county property located at Carmer Road, tax map number 031-02-01-0, Central New York, Beach Incorporated, 2 Central New York City. Okay, proclamations. Autism Acceptance Month. Please keep that in your prayers too. National Vietnam Veterans Day, which was March 29th. We put it on this agenda because the meeting in March was before that. Okay, before we start, I think everybody in this room, everybody that knows Max knows he's leaving us on Friday. He's headed out to the West Coast to become the governor. Max, try a little bit. Max, try a little bit. Commission is not on the agenda because we wanted to surprise this person. Deanna, would you come forward, please? Why did you think you were here? Okay, let me read it. Proclamation, Deanna Ryan Day in Cayuga County, April 26, 2022. Whereas in our democratic society is an important civic responsibility. Can we get that thing fixed
Is
somehow?
any, because nobody can hear us.
You ready? You ready? Nope. Well, while you're doing that, let me keep going.
If they can hear you, check your chat window.
Yeah, they're saying they can hear it.
Amanda, can you mute all?
I'm sorry.
Can you mute everybody else?
Everybody is.
We're done. Let's.
Are they like solely reliant on your information?
Well, the thing is, data was always available to a certain degree. So the different agencies have data, but they only know what they see, right? The clients that they see, or whatever it is that they do. But there was never a good vehicle to have countywide data so that they don't just see what that one agency is doing, but like what the whole situation looks like. And overall in the rural areas or in the city. And so it's not just that this information is for us and because I love data and so I like to look at it. It's really, we feed it back to the agencies so they can make informed decisions for their programs. And that's really the effort here.
So what would you need? Like if we stated the problem, right? You got the data. Like, how do we sustain a program like this? Like, is there a dollar amount? Is there funding that you would need? Like, what's the, like, those are questions that like I would like to know. Like, this great presentation is well needed. It looks like you guys save lives and you get people help. So and all these other agencies need grants, so they need that data for these grants. So what do you need? Because it looks like you guys are running out of funding in the year.
Right. So what this funding is provided is really staffing resources on the county level, not on the individual provider level, but on the county level to facilitate that work. So it's really staffing that's needed in terms of keeping that collaboration going, keeping the data collection and analysis and sharing of that data going, informing the community. We've done a ton of communications campaigns to let the community know what's really going on and what they can do, and we get a ton of feedback for that. So it really comes down to do we want to invest, or does the county want to invest in a countywide vision led by a county team?
And, from my point of view too, is we're starting to get, I think Mary Beth Leeson just she established the opioid settlement money. It is coming in. She has projections of what it is. To your point, I think first question, and the state has actually continued to fund some of the staffing longer than they normally would have because they felt such exceptional work has been done with this initiative. But at some point, if the county decides to continue the coordination that's happening from the staffing out of the mental health department, we would be looking to consider using the opioid settlement money to make that investment in continuation of this coordinated effort. And it appears to me there would also be funds enough to continue some of the community-based organizations programming that fill some of these gaps. I think you've done Monica had admitted that, when they accepted the money, it said to enter into any other contracts. I don't think people realized how much of this money had gone to community-based organizations trying to do this work. So, whether it's through the Community Services Board, through Lauren, we need to identify where the gaps in services are, and then we need to come to the county to make investments of some of these opioid funds to make sure they're filling some of the gaps. And we need a process to do that. But I think that is the vision, that at some point, the county has to consider, is this coordinated effort that's not really being duplicated by any other organization, should it be sustained? And, in my opinion, I think it should be sustained, and I think we'll have opioid funding money to be able to make reinvestments in.
I agree with you, and I think that one of the key factors is that the other organizations are relying on this information, and we're driving the blind. And their purpose is not to, like, if I get it, you can't fix the problem, but you get people help. And you can share this information, and then we can have some data-driven. I think if there's nobody else doing it, it's a no-brainer to me.
And you're not going to do direct service provision, basically, at this point.
No.
The organizations doing the work are.
Yep.
And you work really hard to try to sustain some of the things that have already started without any further investment.
Right. And it's really about the it's as simple as it sounds, which is really not, but bringing the people together to the table and start talking about collaboratively of how to address it, because the agencies are doing a fine job individually, because their mission is to fulfill the mission of their agency. Their job is not to fulfill the mission of the county or do the county's work. That's not an agency's job. That's the county's job.
If I'm not mistaken, you were a little bit handcuffed to do other substances. You
Right.
won't be handcuffed if it's county investment. And you were handcuffed to not do so much prevention and lower the threshold of the younger people that you were working with.
Yeah.
Those handcuffs will all come off
Yes.
and you'll just look at unmet need.
Yes, because there were certain limitations to the scope of the project. But as we were doing the work and as we were collecting the data, I mean, we were specifically responding to opioids, but that didn't mean we didn't see all the other stuff that was going on. And we were still talking about it. We're still trying to respond to it, but there's so much more we could do to really address all substances comprehensively and not just looking at one substance, because people tend to not just misuse one substance. There are many more issues involved. And so if you look at it overall, we have a better chance of addressing the mental health needs, substance use needs, and also hopefully reduce deaths that are resulting from that.
Okay, one more question, Chris.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make it quick too, because I know we have an ambitious agenda. And thank you, Monica, for this comprehensive presentation. I look forward to discussing it further. The one question I have tonight is, I probably should have let it go, but I couldn't. Wanted to make sure that with your training modalities around using Narcan, I want to make sure that you're discussing when they're revived, or what the potential, how do I want to say this? You know what I'm talking about? How they could react when Narcan is administered,
Yes.
and it's a potentially dangerous situation. And
Well, we tell people that they're not going to hug them because they're so happy that they saved their lives. They may be quite irritated. They just put them in withdrawal. It's not a good situation for them in the immediate. So yes, so we do caution people for that. That's why we also always say, you got to call 911. It may be tempting if that person comes back. It's like, I don't need anything. I don't need any trouble. I don't need first responders and police here. But you don't know what happens, so it's still a medical emergency. But yes, we do mention.
thank you.
Mention that.
Hey, Chair, I just got one question about this chart. It looks like there's multiple drugs in most people,
Mhm.
right? So there's more initiatives. So if you're you're funded by opiate, so if there's several different drugs in this chart, the Lean was just saying it would expand that scope of work. Because it looks like, if this, am I reading this right? It's just like fentanyl is in just about everything, and it looks like it's mixed with, some people are averaging like 3 different drugs in one thing.
Yep. And that speaks to that polysubstance use problem, that it doesn't really always make sense to just address one substance. I mean, opioid, don't get me wrong, opioids is the most deadly one. So if people die, it's mostly because of opioids. But they don't always start with opioids, or there are other substances involved that may counteract with each other. So again, the person may not have any intentions of, killing themselves or even getting high potentially. They just may misuse a number of different, even prescription pills, and they have a bad reaction and they overdose on it. And so that just speaks to that problem that we have so many substances that we should be dealing with. And now that we have a framework in place, that worked well for the opioids, we could expand that to other substances and get more data, get more information and responses for that as well.
Last question, Bobby.
Just real quick, Martin, thank you for this. This is awesome. I was here for the last presentation.
Yes, in December. Mhm.
And it was very good. This has got a lot of teeth and it's very, very, very good. Just a real quick question is all the substances included in the hotspots, or were you just pinpointing opioids for those?
Nope, those are all overdoses there that are reported, that where somebody called 911 and it made it into the system, not just opioids.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Monica. Great job. Thank you very much. I'm sure you'll be back someday. Okay, next presentation, Partners for Healthy Watershed, Greg Raymond and Kristen Workman. Welcome, welcome. Good to see you again, Greg.
Thank you for having us.
Welcome.
All right. So my name is Kirsten Workman and I'm here with Greg Raymond today, and we appreciate you taking the time to hear us today. We're going to talk a little bit about continuous improvement for sustainable farms and water quality. And I'm going to let Greg start by introducing himself. And I know I'm a new face, so I'll introduce myself a little bit too. So go ahead, Greg.
Greg Raymond from Sunnyside Farms. It's Scipio Center is our mailing address, but we're actually from Venice Center, but they closed our post office. So we say we're from Scipio Center. I've been on a whole bunch of different local and state watershed groups. It's always been a passion of mine to help out with the environment and do a better job every day on the farm. Third generation at our current location. Currently, we're milking about 5,000 cows and working a little over 7,000 acres of ground. A lot of sod waterways, grass fields, cover crops, methane digester, drag lining manure, lots of different things.
Yeah, and my name is Kirsten Workman, and I'm new to Cornell University's Pro Dairy program. I'm their new nutrient management and environmental sustainability specialist. So if you all have heard from Carl Zenek before, I'm the new Carl. And I've been working in the field of water quality and agriculture my entire career. I started in the Pacific Northwest in Puget Sound, working with farmers there for 10 years, and then came to Vermont, working in Lake Champlain watershed, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, and now here in New York, serving the farmers in the state of New York, addressing water quality issues and beyond with our dairy producers. So I'm excited to be here today and share a little bit of information, but really just talk about, what's going well and where, we've identified some areas for improvement, but I think, we've had a new CAFO permit that came out for draft, and it felt like a good time to sort of check back in and see where we're at. So with that, I think you can go to the next slide. So we've done introductions. We're just really quickly going to talk a little bit about some of the investments that farmers are making, as well as agencies and county governments in these improvements. I'm going to give just a quick update about sort of the main issue that I've seen raised in the new CAFO permit draft that was out for public comment. And then we're going to talk a little bit just generally about where are New York farms, but specifically where are Cayuga County farms, sort of leading by example and some of the good work that's being done. And then I have a little bit of a pitch about some watershed specific and county specific practice inventories that we're thinking about undergoing here in the near future. And just a quick bit on agriculture as a solution to climate change and some of the climate leadership proposals going on in New York now. And then really hoping to just emphasize the point about, really working together, and as folks who represent your community, reaching out to your constituents and the leaders that we have in the dairy industry to really come up with some great solutions to some tricky problems that we're facing. And then open some time, hopefully we'll have some time for discussion and question and answers. So go ahead.
Local investment, of course, everybody knows about CMI, Cayuga Milk Ingredients, a group of local farmers, mainly Cayuga County farmers, built this milk plant. We could have put it anywhere in the state. We would have actually saved money and been able to charge a little bit more for our drawing a blank, all of the products that we produce. But we wanted to invest here in our own community. Just the roots are right here in Cayuga County. We wanted it here, and we want to keep investing in here. Right now we gross about 350 million per year, resulting in over $1 billion in economic impact locally and regionally. 92 employees, averaging $85,000 a year. The farms, we work about 50,000 acres total. We've invested about 130 million in capital to make this plant grow, and we're planning another larger addition that'll add another 65 jobs, permanent jobs, plus all of the construction jobs. And we want to keep things local. Like I said before, it's what we've always done. It's all what we always want to do. And we've always been working on the environment. Both water and air quality are important to us every day. We think about it. And, next couple slides, we'll go through some of the things that we're doing. Individually, so I'm just speaking for myself, but it's fairly typical of most Cayuga County farms, with a couple exceptions, like our digester. But a couple of years ago on the steering committee for the updated rules and regulation committee I was on, we were talking about buffers and sad waterways and all those other things. And so I just did a tally of everything on our own farm, and we have enough buffer strips and side waterways to totally go around Owasco Lake 35 feet wide. So that just to put into perspective of how much that we've done on our own over the years, no cost sharing. It's specific spots that we see need to be fixed, so we fix them. We don't let them continue, so we fix them. So we've done that on our own. We put a digester in about 10 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun. We're making renewable energy from the methane that's released from the digester. It's enough power to power about 800 homes, which is kind of cool. But we use about half of it on the farm, and then the rest goes on the grid. That we sell at a wholesale rate, which is very low. We were one of the first farms in the county to dragline our manure. It's injected directly into the ground. It's taking the trucks off the road, the spreaders off the road. It's just pumped right from the lagoons to the tractor with hoses. So it keeps the neighbors happy. You don't get as much smell and the road traffic. Cover crops, we 100% might not. It's probably about 98%. My dad spreads a lot of the cover crop, and he'll skip some of the back jags and it drives me nuts. But so cover crops, we're using rye in cereal rye, and it does a great job for us. But the total cost between the seed application and termination, there's always pluses and minuses to everything that you do. Cover crops are great, but you have to use chemicals. Pretty much have to use chemicals to terminate them. Currently cost about $45 an acre. So last year we had just shy of 3,400 acres that we did. And so it's $150 some thousand that we every year the last 20 years. So it's a lot of money that we've invested in cover crops. We believe in it. It's crazy expensive, but we think that it works. Most of our steeper fields were on rolling hills, so we've turned a lot of the side hills into permanent grass fields. The first ones we've started to reseed them after 15 years, but so it prevents erosion there. Future plans are covering some of our lagoons to keep the rainwater out, and installing advanced nutrient separation system. It'll help us better move our nutrients around and decrease our fertilizer cost.
And while Greg is clearly exceptional and a really good manager and paying attention to these details, he is by no means alone. There's other farmers in this room and across the county who are doing a lot of that work in some fashion that fits their farm specifically across the county and the state. Next slide. So just one thing I wanted to, the elephant in the room, we've heard a lot about the new CAFO permit. Some folks have paid more attention to that than others. So that for those of you that don't know, this is the permit that covers some of our larger dairy producers and livestock producers that are spreading manure and manage livestock. And one of the biggest things I'd like to point out first about that is, in any profession or industry, right, you're going to have some issues of non-compliance, and farming is no different. So we're not going to ever get away from that completely. And there's accidents and things that happen. But these farms, like Greg and others, are really doing a lot to protect water quality. So you've seen just one example today, but there's farms like that across the county and the state that are working diligently every day. and water quality and environmental sustainability really is at the top of their list every day. They are highly inspected and monitored. How many times do you see an inspector? Every year, at least.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. And so, they're not just out there in the wild, wild west doing what they want, which I get a lot of from folks. And it's not just about nutrient management plans and the permit per se, but there's so many other areas that they're regulated under as a result of that sort of permitting process. And so I've heard even in this room, sort of, the word CAFO or used as a sort of a derogatory term, which is unfortunate. And it's often used in a negative light. And I think that it's an opportunity to understand that situation just a little bit better. And maybe we can kind of turn that on its head and think of it as a positive, because these are the farms that are really doing the most. They have the most data. They're held to a very high standard. They have to have records and report every year. They're inspected. They have professionals they hire to help them make decisions and implement these practices on their farm. They do a lot of that investment on their own, but they also rely on soil and water conservation districts and USDA and NRCS and other funding sources to help them. So there's a lot of oversight going on there. And so as part of that and part of the CAFO permit, I put up there that permit alone is just 52 pages, let alone all the things that it refers to. But there's some concern about this idea of the permit moving from a 5-year permit term to a 10-year permit term, which is understandable. With the idea of like, if we have this 10-year permit, clearly things change, science is changing all the time, rules are changing, how do we keep up to date with a 10-year permit? And so one of the pieces to that is that permit is designed and written into New York rules and regs so that it can be modified, and parts of that permit can be modified. And I just gave a couple of examples of why parts of the permit might be modified without having to open up the entire permit through the whole process, which takes quite a bit of time and effort and resources on part of DEC. And so what I wanted to point out to you today is, in addition to modifying the permit actually refers to so many other pieces that are continuously being updated. And those happen sort of in conjunction with, but also sort of independent of that permit term. So if you go to the next slide, I actually have a better version of this that I'm happy to share with you, and you aren't going to be able to read any of that, but what I want you to know is up at the top there, you see the CAFO permit, that 52 pages of very specific rules, right? Well, in addition to that, those rules are referring to sort of 2 buckets, generally, of practices and guidance, standards, engineering design standards, nutrient guidelines, risk assessments, and scientific sort of documents. And those live generally under the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service and through Cornell College of Ag and Life Sciences, where I live. And we get input from lots of people through that process, but in each of those boxes, the green ones go to USDA, the red ones go to Cornell. Those are continuously and constantly being updated. So for example, the nitrogen guidelines are under update currently. We're updating the nitrogen guidelines for how farmers apply nitrogen on their fields. The phosphorus index was just updated, and that's being brought into those standards. And there's lots of arrows that sort of circle around and point to each other, because there's a lot of partnerships and information that's being shared so that we can make sure that we're using the best and most up-to-date science. And the other piece I hope you take away from this is that, poor Greg, he has to follow all of that. So like when we change the nitrogen guidelines, not only does he have to keep up with what's new in the permit, right? He's got to keep up with these things that are also being updated. So it's a two-sided coin, right? But that, as it should be. And I think the farmers are sort of up for that challenge. And now that we've had this permit for, 20 years, we're kind of figured that out. And I think people see the benefit to that. And it's difficult. It's not an easy task, but I think farmers and agencies and partners have been up to the challenge and are continuously improving how it gets implemented on the ground. And I think it's actually doing what it's designed to do and working. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the other question we get as a result of that, well, should all farms have a plan like that, right? And so in Wasco Lake in particular, and other folks are sort of thinking, well, should all farms in our watersheds have these management plans? I'm a nutrient management person, so I love when farmers have a nutrient management plan. I would never say no to that. But I do want to identify that there's voluntary processes already in place. The Agency of Agriculture has the Ag Environmental Management Program, where they do a lot of work in conjunction with the soil and water conservation districts. Small farms can opt into the CAFO permit if they want to. NRCS programs have planning where a farm can get a management plan so they can qualify for other practices. The Dairy Advancement Program through Cornell offers assistance. And the key piece of this is when farms opt into that system for anything, cover crops, reducing tillage, doing nutrient management, that's when we see what I call them better stickiness, right? Like a farm that wants to have a plan and goes to their soil and water conservation district for help, they're going to go through a process that's tailored to them. They're there for the right reasons, and they really do own it. And they adopt it, and it becomes a part of their operation. As opposed to sometimes when we regulate our way there, things sort of like, they happen, but they may not stick for the long term. In addition, if we don't have the resources to enforce all these plans to all the farms in our watersheds, then they definitely won't have that sort of stickiness. And so, we can do that. I think there's room for more management plans, but we're going to need the resources to do that. And I shared just a couple numbers that Tyler Knapp from Cayuga Soil and Water Conservation District had put together, I think for you folks a couple years ago. It takes money, it takes time, it takes 3 years for a planner to get certified to write these plans for farms. And then it takes resources and effort. And so just one example, on Owasco Lake, they set the goal of if 30% of the cropland in the watershed and 30 facilities is about $400,000. And again, if it's not voluntary, then we also have to think about who is responsible for compliance. So that would be another resource that we would have to identify. But next slide. I just wanted to share is there's a lot of good going on. I think Greg shared some of that already. New York has a robust food system that's really anchored in conservation. And I shared a resource there that you're welcome to go visit. But the Union for Concerned Scientists does this sort of scorecard. And, we're in the green zone there in the top 13 for conservation practices. And that's really anchored in like reducing tillage, these practices that we've talked about before, cover cropping, good grazing management, conservation easements. They list all the reasons they sort of rank you that way. And really dairy as the anchor of farming in New York. The top 4 crops are actually dairy related in the state. And the industry has really robust goals right now, both for carbon emissions and net zero, but also for water quality and nutrient use. And so that's a good thing to really talk about. But also I think in Cayuga County, we're especially lucky. So one example of that is in New York State, we estimate roughly 13.5% of the cropland is cover cropped. Definitely some room for improvement there. But here locally, the cooperative extension and the Soil and Water Conservation District estimate we're closer to 60 or 70% of our cropland is actually cover cropped. And that's amazing because there's parts of this country where we're at 1 or 2%. So 60 or 70% is amazing. We're working as a group to address issues proactively. I think, Greg and Tanya are here with Partners for Healthy Watersheds. That's a great example of that work. And I think sharing those stories sort of upwards, both to the community and to folks like yourself who are sort of tasked with making important decisions. I think that's an important thing to continue. I don't know if many of you are aware of our Owasco effort and Partners for Healthy Watershed, really trying to share those stories and highlight success in the work that's being done. But I think the key to that is that, when other farmers hear what's possible and what is working, they learn from each other. And I think those good news stories really start to shift the culture about, what a goal for our farming community is in terms of not just milk production or numbers of animals, but really about stewardship. And I get to hear those stories all the time about farmers who really hang their hat on their stewardship ethic. Did I miss anything on that one? Anything else you want to? Okay. So the key here is that, your farmers want to continue to improve. So in New York, we've seen an increase between ag censuses. We had a 37.2% increase in the adoption of cover cropping. We've seen a 20% increase in no-till practices. And we've seen up at the top there, that's some of Dr. Corrine Kettering's work on phosphorus mass balances. We've seen farms in New York really come into those boxes, which we consider a feasible mass balance for phosphorus, and really kind of tailor their nutrient efficiency in that area, and seen huge improvements there. But we're hoping to learn more. And so part of that is understanding what's going on in the county and what farmers really are doing. Right now, we can get a good catch, right, from the AIM program and different tiers and what practices are being adopted. We know from our county extension educators, sort of some anecdotal information. NRCS has numbers, but what we don't capture is what the farmers are doing without assistance. And so we'd love to be able to do a better, more specific inventory of that information. And Tyler at the Soil and Water Conservation District has a great framework already set up to sort of collect that information if we have enough boots on the ground to kind of gather it. Farmers like Greg have already raised their hand, said, whatever you want to know, I'll share with you. And dairy farms are great because they have all that information because of this CAFO permit process already. But there's a lot of things we could inventory. And so I think the question is sort of, I've listed a bunch there, but I'd love to know sort of what you guys want to know. Do you want to know it by watershed? Do you want to know it by county, by farm type? And what are the practices you are interested in hearing about? And so I'd love to know, if we have a couple minutes later to hear what you guys are interested in folks like us finding more out about what farmers are up to. And we can then identify the gaps so that we can really pinpoint those resources in the right place and know where we should be focusing both our technical assistance and outreach, but also our financial assistance and outreach. So I think my next slide just asks that question. What, where? So we have the system in place. I think, it'd be great to know if you guys have other priorities we're missing. Go ahead. Next slide. And just another reminder that, right, with the climate leadership policy now in place, we started with water quality, but we're really continuing to improve that and also with climate smart farming. And so that little pie of the chart there is all the sources of greenhouse gas emissions estimated in New York. They estimate that agriculture is about 6%, but they've also identified that agriculture can be a much larger part of the solution and actually can get us to our goals in the draft scoping plan. And actually they use the word exceed that goal by relying on forestry and farming as a key way to do that. And luckily, many of the water quality practices that you're already hearing Greg's already doing with nutrient management and conservation practices, many of those are the same, not all. But we're doing a lot of work to measure and monitor and evaluate and see which ones are really going to work the best for that. So I think we should continue, right? We're on the right track and continue to encourage this responsible stewardship of manure and fertilizer nutrients, good farming practices. And I think a good reminder that, we have a good diversity of farms in New York and across the county. And I think less farms is not probably the answer. If we're going to rely on them to sort of lift us into this climate resiliency zone, we want to have more of those good land managers out there. So encouraging those where we can. And I think next slide. Yeah, so I'll just share a quick story that, I'm trying not to talk about Vermont too much anymore, but, Lake Champlain was a really galvanizing thing for the state of Vermont. And they really rose to the occasion, and where it came to be the best and most productive is when all the folks and all the partners were at the table. And New York has a strong basis that in that already. We have good groups, we have good coordination with our state agencies. I think we need to continue to remember to do that. If we all have the same goal, and I think Greg has the same goal as many of you do for clean water and clean air, what I have found in my career is that if we can rely on those folks who are on the ground and have to implement these practices and these goals, those are the folks that should be at the table as we start to make those decisions about policy and regulations, because then often what comes out of that discussion is a better solution, one that's probably more effective to get us where we need to go and we can actually implement on the ground. And that's what's really important. And you have multiple people in this room and beyond this room, dozens and dozens of farmers who would be willing to help in that effort. And so I encourage you to sort of reach out to both individual farmers and groups like the Partners for Healthy Watersheds, your soil and water conservation districts, the cooperative extension, pro dairy, health department, all the players, when they all get at the table and sort of have that same goal is what can be a really powerful solution. And so I see that as being a huge potential here as well. And I think, Greg's really risen to the occasion. You saw the list of sort of groups he's served on. And so I think you have a really great resource already. I think that's all I have for slides. If there's any questions for us, or you have any areas, I brought my notebook so I could write down if anyone had anything in particular.
Any questions for Kristen and Greg? Anything at all?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that whenever tours are presented,
either by Soil and Water or by Greg or his other partners. Take advantage of that. I know many of you in this room have. They're very educational. I was born and raised in the city. I live just outside of the city. I'm not quite a country. I do have a well. Grants past me. Well, stopped working. That was interesting. So maybe I am a country girl now. But I encourage everybody to get out there if you haven't had that experience. And it's enlightened me as a member of the watershed groups, the multiple watershed groups that I'm on with Greg. Greg's been a constant voice on those groups, but take advantage of those things as they arise. I think it's a benefit everyone.
Yeah, and I know that we're trying to plan those already for the summer, so.
Jim?
Sure. So how do you reach out to the, I'm District 1, so I'm the very north end of the county, and meeting with some of the farmers at about 5:30 the other morning. How do you reach out to the small farmers? How do they get to these programs? Who
Their
reaches out
first
to
stop
them?
would probably be Doug's office at the Soil and Water Conservation District.
Because these guys run their farm, they
Yep.
have a full-time job,
Yep,
and they're volunteer firemen.
Yep.
You know,
you got it.
so another permit to be filled out, and another process to go through.
Yep, and there's a lot of technical assistance and
Okay.
Yeah, soil and water's definitely the place to approach that for sure.
they'll send folks to that.
Doug? Oh, was he here? Or is it Brian? Who's giving whose number away? Okay.
Hey, any other questions? Not?
Yeah.
Greg, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Kristen, I don't know. Next, you got a place to stay out there.
Oh. Hit me up. I got family.
Thanks. I want to thank Tanya and Greg for coming. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. Several of us met together and we got a lot of information, and thank God for our farmers, because I don't know where we'd be without them. So thank you again very much. Okay, next presentation, Spruce Haven Farm, CLA Research Project. Good, Doug? Come on up, sir. How are you today?
Good. Good. Chairman Gould, good to see you.
Nice to see you again.
Your hand.
Thank
Good
you.
for the progress on the drug issue. It's slowly turning around since the last time we talked.
I hope it is.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. My voice doesn't carry very well, so just raise your hand if I get quiet, okay? So I'm Doug Young. We have a dairy farm, Spruce Haven Farm. It's just about 6 miles from here. The reason I'm here today is Legislator Kerr came up to the farm one Saturday and asked a bunch of questions about different projects we're working on. And one of them was CLA. She said, "What's with CLA?" So I gave her an update and she said, "Well, why don't we talk to the legislature about it?" And I said, "Okay." So here we are. You want to comment on why you thought it was relevant?
Well, I would just say, first of all, I just want to say great presentations on the farming. We do have a resolution I saw on the desk about the 60 hours, and I'm glad to see that. But ag is such a huge economic driver in our county, and especially with the dairy industry. I've always been interested in the work that's been happening with dairy and CMI. And now the health research that you have or you're working on, I think is fascinating. Holds real promise potentially for health applications. I'm not a scientific expert, but my understanding is that you developed or identified a way to isolate the CLA in milk, natural milk product, which has specific benefits to health that they're not able to replicate outside of that natural environment. So even though it's been tried in the past, we haven't been able to achieve certain health results with CLA. And hence this new study. So I just think it's interesting, potentially could put the dairy industry on the map even for Cayuga County, and something I would love to hear more about. I think it would be interesting for us to hear more about as well. And I know that you've sought some funding from the state Department of Health on this. I don't know what the status is of that, but something I would love to be able to invest in, whether it's locally or through the state, to try to move some of this research work forward and see where it lands.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Greg, good job. Good to see you. Thank you, Kirsten. Tanya. These are three people that pour their lives into the dairy industry and the public. So thank you. I'm going to try to, should I stick with 5 minutes? Because you're
got
a little
10.
behind
You got
schedule.
10.
This is an
Trish, 5 of them.
This is an interesting opportunity. So this is not a request. I just want to give you a little bit to think about, and I'll try to go through it quickly. And if you have more information you'd like to get, there's a complete packet of information available, I think, if you haven't already reviewed it. So we'll hit the next slide. So Tricia mentioned there's the ARPA funds, Cayuga County, and it could possibly be a source to fund the first phase of research on the CLA. The specific study is $170,000 for a long-term CLA health effect study. We've already been talking to New York State Ag and Markets, New York State Office of the Aging, and New York State Ag and Markets is talking to the New York State Department of Health as this becoming a statewide initiative. Okay, next slide. This slide, we're talking about nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon. A lot of people forget the other part of the equation, nutrition, human nutrition. If we don't, our primary job is to produce food. So it really needs to be an equation. What's the human nutrition and what's the environmental footprint? It's a very simple equation. And if all consumers bought their food with that equation in mind, it would transform the food production system for the better. So our farm is working toward the highest nutrition with the lowest environmental footprint. That's that equation. Okay. Next slide, please. Let's just highlight some of the goals we've been working on for about 20 years. Multiply and replenish. Multiply is the numerator and replenish is the denominator. There's that equation again. Interestingly, it comes from the Bible. So Genesis 1:28, if you want to look into it. Next slide. So Greg mentioned that Cayuga Milk Ingredients is going to be doubling. They're going to be putting in an aseptic line in about 2 years. At that point, we'll be able to put a consumer product on a package and ship it all over the state, all over the country, and all over the world, possibly. So next slide. New York State spends $81 billion a year on healthcare. It's 40% of the budget. 20% on education. So next slide, please. These are the causes of death in the United States. Heart disease, 650,000. Cancer, 600,000. That's kind of humbling. That happens every year. COVID's a big thing for a year or two. This happens every year. This is from the CDC in 2017. Can you hear me? Okay, next slide, please. So the National Academy of Sciences in 1996 said conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA, is shown as unequivocally anti-carcinogenic in animal models. Does that make sense? So the National Academy of Sciences, one of the most reputable scientific bodies in the world, said CLA is unequivocally anti-carcinogenic. You'd think that would get people's attention. See the little arrow? That's when the National Academy of Sciences made that statement. The blue is the amount of investment the United States has put into cancer research and prevention since that point. $165 billion. Read the history of cancer. And I talked to the head of the NIH after I heard him present in Washington. I said, have you ever heard of CLA? He said, no. So it's really mysterious why there hasn't been more done with CLA. Next slide. So on our label, we have a beverage we ship around the country. It's an aseptic beverage, and the wording there on the screen says CLA is produced by cows, exclamation point. Together, we will work to quantify the effect of CLA on cancer, heart disease, obesity, diabetes. That wording was approved by the United States FDA. My daughter, Lindsay, was a brand manager. We went to Washington, DC and met with the FDA. There's 6 scientists, 5 or 6 around the table. And we presented that language to them and they said, yes. And they followed it up with an email. They said, not only is this approved, but we want to help. FDA does not approve labels. So farmer walks in and says, how's this sound? They said, that sounds great. So this is an unbelievable opportunity for farmers to improve the 4 biggest diseases of mankind, but we need to get started. So there's thousands of studies on animals, but there's very few on humans. We need to make the jump from animal studies to human studies. Any questions so far? I've only got a few more slides, so. Okay, next slide. This is CLA. Any biochemists in the room? Cis 9 trans 11 conjugated linoleic acid. See the 2 arrows? That's where the double bonds are. So this is a slide by Dale Bauman at Cornell. He's the second most widely published scientist in the world. He's a really good friend and awesome person. So when a cow is chewing her cud in her stall, she's moving this double bond from here to here, making it anti-cancer. So it's anti-cancer, anti-heart disease, anti-diabetes, anti-obesity, immune modulation, bone mineralization. For years, I ignored this immune modulation until COVID hit. So that's a whole other aspect of CLA that has amazing promise. Next slide, please. This is a study done by Roswell Cancer Institute in Buffalo, 1995. This shows the effect of CLA on breast cancer. So this is the control. This is breast cancer. So that's the control. The higher the CLA, the lower the incidence of breast cancer. So that's one of the studies that the National Academy of Sciences used to say it's unequivocally anti-carcinogenic. The study was using high CLA milk from cows. Next slide, please. So we tried to turn this concept into a product that we can sell to the public, but more importantly, to educate the public about the goodness of dairy, about the goodness of CLA, but always in the context of environment. Got to have high nutrition and low environmental footprint. So the one on the left is the first version. We sold that for 2 years. It was awarded a number of awards, including that one there. But they said we really needed to redesign the label. So hired a local artist and came up with version number 2, which is there. So where we feature the immunity aspects more. So that's all I'm gonna. Is there any questions or comments?
I actually have a question. The study that you just showed the graph on,
Yes.
Was that on a human-based study?
That was an animal study.
Do you know which animal?
Not sure if it's rats or mice.
Okay.
There's thousands of studies done. That was one that really put it into context. Most of the studies were done with chemically produced CLA rather than naturally produced. I have one more slide, relates to the subject that you heard before. This is Tom Brenna. He's a principal investigator. If fund this, he would be leading that. More slides. One more. So there's all this stuff that Kirsten and Greg just shared. Probably wondering, well, what's the bottom line? What's the real story here? This is my attempt at giving the final story. The green line represents the meals produced, fat, protein, essential nutrients. This is our farm, but if you took Cayuga marketing, you could multiply the number on the left by 20 and it'd be the same curve. The blue line is the phosphorus level in the 3 lakes in Cayuga County over 50 years. That makes sense? Yes. I want to make sure everybody understands. So I took the average phosphorus from the DEC's report, 2018. This is the amount of phosphorus in 1975. This is what it is. So they have this much more food produced in Cayuga County and having no impact on phosphorus. That's a neat story. Any questions or comments? I think I went over 5 minutes.
Oh, Doug, you did fine. Anything for Doug at all? Anybody? All right, Doug, thank you very much. Okay, before we move on, I'm going to close the public hearing at 7:25. Okay, privilege of the floor. Anybody want to have anybody? Hearing none. Minutes to approve, March 22nd, 2022. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All in favor, aye. Communications and announcements. There's none on the sheet. Is Dr. Durant on? Where? Do you see him?
I don't see him on, no.
I think he emailed and said he wasn't going to be able to make it tonight.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Committee reports, individual legislators reports, anything from any? Yes, Aileen.
Just a quick item. You may have seen in the paper, I don't think that they have come out with an exact announcement yet, but CETA has hired a new CEO. His name is Bradley Rodwell. So I'm looking forward to introducing him as planning committee. They also have backfilled Danielle Zappel's position. I also look forward to sort of introducing the whole team. So they certainly have gone through 8 months of a transition. So this is an exciting time for CETA to get started again. So
Yeah, it was in the paper today.
Yep.
Thank you. Trish.
This isn't specific to me, but I just wanted to mention Monica Selvage has also been recognized as receiving an award from the Chamber of Commerce for her healing communities work in this county for community impact. So there's still time, I think, to get your tickets if you want to go to that chamber dinner or luncheon, but just wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, anyone else?
Chair.
Yes.
And along those lines, I just wanted to remind legislators that tomorrow there is an opportunity for all of us to look at the kinds of things that are happening at Nick's Ride, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. an open house. It will include peers and folks actually talking, telling stories. It's I think if time is available to all, something to think about putting on your schedule for tomorrow.
Very quickly, there's been a few of us, Lydia, myself, Trish, and Heidi, meeting to look at the Youth Bureau job spec. We've been working with Diane. Hopefully it is coming to a conclusion so it can go to the commission. It hadn't been updated since 1970. 8, I think. So at some point in the near future, we'll be bringing a recommendation, probably through Health and Human Services, about finally making an appointment of a youth bureau director. And once it's classified, then we'll be waiting for Diane to give us the grade salary. But that piece is moving forward because technically we don't have a youth bureau director at this point.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Too.
Yep.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, moving on. Chairman's report. I'm going to be short because it is getting, so I want to thank Max one more time. I've thanked him probably 100 times now, but I mean, he made such an impression for being there only like 10 months. He's done such a great job. Deanna, I want to thank you again too for doing such a great job. Always, every day, you get your updates. And congratulations on that award. That's outstanding. Okay, I want to thank all my fellow legislators like I do every year, every month, excuse me, and the county employees that, you know, something I've been working for this county for a lot of years off and on, and it amazes me every day what our county employees do. So I really want to thank all the department heads that are here and thank everyone. Okay, operations officer, I think you all know that naturally. Sharina Androsco, I think probably most of you in the room know her. She's been in the county off and on for several years. I want to thank Sheila and Lynn and Diane for doing the interviews with me. I don't think we could have picked anybody better. She starts, I think everybody knows, next Monday, May 2nd. So congratulations to Sharine. I'm sure Sue's already missing her, but redistricting, it'll be on the agenda. It is on the agenda. Chris will be introducing that a little bit later. I want to thank him for all his hard work on that. And certainly Katie and Cheryl, they presented at least twice, maybe more than that, to the caucuses and the committee. So I want to thank everybody for the hard work on that because it's been quite a while and I think it's going to come to a conclusion tonight. Fred and Chris, both of them, they did a lot of input in that too. So thank you. Form of government. Probably we'll be getting into that very soon after this redistricting is done, which will be tonight. We'll get into the form of government. I know there's a lot more to it than I thought. So we really got to do our homework before we decide what we're going to do there. County office building project. It's moving along. I didn't ask Lynn what the agenda was for Barton and Law to get back to us, but I think it's the end of this month or beginning of next month. Do you know, Chris? I think that's what it is. So they'll be getting back to us pretty quickly here. And we'll have something, an update on that. But I want to thank all the department heads and the employees because they interviewed a lot of people and it took a lot of time away from your daily work. So I want to thank you. COVID update, it's still here. We all know that. You look at the paper, we were one of 17 counties in the country about a month ago for this disease. And we still got to remember it's here. It's up to anybody that wants to wear a mask or not. That's totally up to them. We have all 4 contracts are up this year. Lucky us. SEAC, the correction officers will be first, then the road patrol deputies, then the lieutenants at the sheriff's office, and last will be CSEA. So we've already met with CSEA a couple times. I'm meeting with the attorneys and the correction officers and the sheriffs tomorrow. So that's going to be starting very quickly. So all 4 up in 1 year, that's kind of unheard of. Okay, let's get right on into the resolutions. Hans, ways and means, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 5 resolutions. WM2 needs to be modified. Okay, I offer an amendment to it by replacing each instance of Central New York Feeds Incorporated with Mark W. Bitts Family 2 Incorporated. Anyone have a problem? Not a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Discussion, yeah, discussion, anybody? Okay.
So we're just changing the name.
Yeah.
So let's vote on the amendment. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now let's vote. I need a motion to move amendment.
W1 through 5, please.
Wait.
No, we got to finish that one.
Got to finish that one because it was
Gotta finish
amended.
number 2.
You're right, you're right.
Okay, motion to move to number 2.
Second that.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Right, approved. Okay, go ahead.
I offer all 5 as a bundle.
I'd like to separate WM3. Separate WM3, please.
Okay. 1, 2, and 4, and 5, please, as a bundle.
Motion?
Yeah.
1, 4, and
5.
1, 4,
Yes.
5.
Okay,
I'll second that. I second 1, 4, and 5.
discussion on that?
Okay.
Not all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Go ahead on, number 3.
I'll move it for discussion.
WM3, on.
Second it.
Any discussion?
I mentioned this at Ways and Means. I believe that this is meant to abolish the Office of County Administrator. We have not had the discussion, as you just mentioned, about the next form of government. We do need a structure in place. I don't have a crystal ball, neither does anyone in this room, so I don't feel like it's the proper time to abolish this just yet. We did discuss the history of our level of county administrators in this county. I do agree, we need to do something. I just don't think that time is now. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Right.
Yeah, I mean, concur with what she just.
I'm going to ask our county attorney to explain this a little bit because I think it's confusing to some people. It was in the committee meeting, so can you explain a little bit more on it?
In general,
In general.
we passed in 2017, we went through a similar process, public hearing. Prior to that, there was an awful lot of work, I think, in developing this document, the local law. Held a public hearing, the following month, they adopted it, and certain components of the local law have been, since the lack of the administrator, have been neglected, I will say. There's direct line control over the IT department, which I think generated 2 or 3 local laws ago when we were contracting our entire IT department out to Entree. That's still present in the local law. It's not followed. We have a department head. We have a very capable department head who is currently in the process of restructuring the IT department. We have an accounts payable person who reports to the administrator. There is no direction to report to Ways, which clearly that needs to happen. And either you have the person be a department head or you give them an actual human being to report to. There's other examples that are contained in the local law. I will say if the option is to go to an administrator without changing the actual form of government, transferring powers from the legislature to an executive or some other countywide elected person, even an appointed person who changed the power structure, that would take a referendum. This local law did not require a referendum because that local law divested none of the powers, duties, or authorities from the legislature, which perhaps could have been one of the problems why we've had a difficult time keeping an administrator for any length of time. But if the choice ultimately at the end of the day is to go back to that form, I suspect we could bring the document back, have another public hearing, and reenact the local law, probably with a few tweaks. But yeah, I mean, it would take at the very least 10 days. You gotta have for a public hearing so many days before the meeting. That would take a special meeting, but in general, about 2 months, two meetings.
All right, let me ask you a couple of questions. I was told at the beginning, I know it was, that this was just because of the auditor had nobody to answer to because we didn't have a county administrator.
The auditor is an office that is set up by state law, auditing claims.
Purchasing director, did you mean?
No, I meant auditor. That's what I was told.
The auditor, so we have an auditor here working with us right now from our accounting firm. And they're actually going through our procedures and steps and making sure we don't have conflicts and things like that. The claims audit is a function that is assigned to the Board of Supervisors, or in our case, the legislature. However, the legislature has the ability to appoint a county auditor who takes on that responsibility, ensures that there is claims coming in are lawful county charges. But that's an office. And
Okay.
that person reports to the legislature. Is his own department head, so to speak.
So this isn't just about changing everything we have that says county administrator on it. It's a lot, that's a lot more than that.
Well, there's also several policies that reference the audit, the administrator, administrator or his delegee. The only place I think that substitutes the chair to become the acting administrator or to exercise those responsibilities is in your rules of order. I think it's section 9, maybe 7. And the rules of order are simply passed annually by a majority of this board and by resolution. And a resolution does not supersede a local law.
Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could, I'd like to say that it's my understanding that this resolution's intent is to facilitate the day-to-day operations of the county. It's not to address what is a global or a more global discussion about the form of government, which will be addressed post haste. So having said that, I'd like to call the question and I would request a second in order to call the question officially.
Your second?
I'll second it.
Okay, question has been called. All right. Make a motion for WM3.
You have a motion and a second on the floor. Unless you
Yeah, motion is.
have to vote on that.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, all in favor of the question, calling the question?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On the question or the resolution?
Call the question.
Oh, to call the question.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now a motion to approve the resolution, WM3.
Move it.
Second,
Second, Lydia.
any discussion? Any more discussion?
We can.
Any, go ahead.
I did have a question for a clarity from Attorney Palermo. When you mentioned that one of the sticking points with not having an acting administrator was some supervisory issues with various department heads. By repealing this, how do we resolve those supervisory issues?
I think for.
I'm sorry.
Point of order.
Thank you.
All right, the question was called. I shouldn't have unrecognized it, but that's okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm gonna abstain. I'm sorry.
Okay, it passed. Okay, Health and Human Services, Elaine.
Yes, Health and Human Services, at Waverly has had 10 resolutions. HH6 was asked to be amended to make it clear that the compliance program would be assumed by the deputy director because we weren't going to fill the compliance officer, but the program itself will be overseen by the deputy director of mental health. And we did ask permission at Ways and Means to add HH11, which everyone has a copy of, which is to authorize the lease between PFI Housing Company of Auburn for a portion of a piece of the Boyle Center, so that starting in June, the Office for the Aging staff will all be located over at the Boyle Center in the basement and on the first floor. And you'll see in the resolution, they're just going to transfer the $7,000 into the rental expense. They're able to cover the cost of this rent, and they will be able to cover it through 2024.
I'll move them all as a bundle.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Yep.
Government ops, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Government Operations has 8 resolutions. They've all been through both committees. I would euphemistically offer them all as a bundle.
Okay, second
Yay.
discussion on any of them. If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chris passed. Planning.
Were you
opposed?
You opposed?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
All 8 of them?
Just making sure.
Makes it easier, doesn't it?
Lisa, a lot easier last night.
That's my BIG.
Yeah, nice.
No money, no problem.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hey, Lee, we needed a laugh. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, planning, we have 4 resolutions. They've all been to committee and I offer them as a bundle. Separate them.
Motion,
Second.
right? Any discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, opposed. Thank you. Public Works, Andy.
Public Works, Mr. Chairman, has been through both committees. All the resolutions were passed unanimously. PW, no, wait, never mind. PW 7 doesn't need a 2/3 vote anymore because we amended it. So I'd offer them as a bundle unless somebody wants to separate.
Move them.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion on any of them? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yes, thank you. Judicial and Public Safety, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. JPS has 8 resolutions tonight. All have passed through both committees. I would like to offer them as a bundle unless anyone would like getting one of them singled out.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? If not all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Okay, we got some other ones here, as you know. Ledge 1, authorizing the chair to fill the secretary to the chairperson position.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ledge 2, authorizing appointments to various boards and agencies. Motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Ledge 3, this was added just yesterday. Authorizing the use of ARPA funds for projects in the Finance Department, Office for the Aging, Probation Department, Highway Department, and Employment and Training.
Move it, Lydia.
Second. Okay, any discussion?
I would like to mention in support of this, that there are becoming more and more state Supreme Courts rejecting COVID-19 business interruption claims, which makes this even more important for our region.
Okay. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, ledge 4 is approved. Okay, we've got 3 others here. Redistricting. Chris?
Like 4 first.
You want to do 4 first? Yeah.
Yeah, mobile crisis, sorry, mobile crisis intervention team. I think we all discussed that in several of our committees. As we know that. Okay,
Nightingale, second.
any discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Chris,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Killed the tree for this one.
It's that important. Mr. Chair, I have circulated the resolution. It's very comprehensive. I think it's in quite detailed. Apologize for the delay, but we were kind of right up to the last minute with the printing presses. I don't think that it's anything that we all haven't discussed. Well, I think we've had quite a robust debate about this. I'll call your attention to right in the title of this resolution. It says amending the local law of 1992. To put that into perspective, that was 30 years ago. I know because I graduated from high school 30 years ago. And that means we have missed, this is our 3rd opportunity to redistrict to find an equitable solution. I believe we've found that equitable solution. And this proposal, I would also add, only takes this to a referendum. So in passing this today, we bring it on to the people to see if they agree with our conclusions that we have found the most equitable solution. So therefore, I would.
For discussion.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion.
I would like to discuss, please.
Go ahead.
According to my constituents, limiting government means eliminating government overreach, stopping making laws that take away constitutional rights, and stopping making mandates aligned with groups who are only supposed to provide data. They do not mean taking away their representation and their voices in the rooms. Adding hundreds of constituents to a legislator's district does not add government. It diminishes opportunity to be represented in the rooms.
Discussion. Okay, all in favor? Oh, go ahead, Jim.
So I just want to say that before I cast my vote on this, that I do think that we're trying to achieve a couple of things. And one was to get to one district, one vote. And for that, I would like to, I am going to vote for this to go out for a public vote to see what the public thinks about it. I want to at least give it that opportunity. There is an alternative. It may not be the best alternative. But for that reason, I just want to make note in case my constituents call me, I'll explain to them the rest, but
Thank you.
Support this.
Thank you very much. Hans?
Well, I'm opposed to the solution that the committee has come up with. And the basic reason is it does reduce our ability to include people. It makes it less inclusive, our government. And the major reason this is being done, it could be easily accomplished by merely changing our weighted voting numbers, which would be more accurate in representing all the people than this concept. There's still gaps of 200 people who would not be represented in weighted voting, without weighted, in the proposal, I should say. So I'm not opposed to the public hearing, but I am opposed to the law, and I think it's wrong for the county for various reasons. And the given reason for going to that is so we don't have the 8-7 and 7 winning. And how often did that happen? Most of us have never seen it happen, or maybe seen it happen once. What's the big problem with it? Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
Mr. Chair, I feel compelled to vote in that is one of the motivations, but not the sum of the motivations. I, again, must reinforce that we need to redistrict every 10 years. That's required, and do so proportionately, and have a situation where each person has an equal vote on the legislature. And that is the intent of the state law, and it's the intent of what I believe that we're trying to achieve here. Thank you.
Andy?
I think I want to say is when this goes to the public, I would like to make sure that every town supervisor gets it, every village mayor or whatever, because I'm not downgrading, trying to be an ass to our IT department, because I think they're doing a great job now, but our website is still very hard for people to, get through. So, I mean, let's not have, it's kind of like our public hearings. Do we generally get anybody for a public hearing? No, because 85% of our county doesn't even know we had a public hearing tonight. So this, as important as this is, needs to be brought up at every town board meeting so that their people, more than the county needs to push this out if it's going to be a referendum.
Okay, I just want to add my 2 cents too. I think smaller government doesn't make it bad government. If Washington had smaller government, Albany had smaller government, we might get something accomplished. I feel that we can definitely accomplish something in this county with 11 legislators. Go ahead, Alex.
I'd like to point out that Russia has smaller government, extremely small government, one person, which is the most efficient, but it's not good for the people. Thank you.
Welcome. Lydia.
Thank you. Yes, we do have to redistrict based on New York State requirements. However, it is my understanding that just recalculating the weighted vote will satisfy that requirement.
Okay, anybody else? We've had 4 months of discussion. I think it's time to vote. All in favor of this resolution?
Aye.
Aye. Raise your hand, please. Okay, opposed? Okay, thank you. Ron. Passed.
I was just going to say, Andy, if we had broadband.
Okay, our next resolution is going to be Brian's resolution. Brian asked me to read it, so I will. It's definitely, I want everybody to know this is Brian's resolution. I think he did a good job. Appropriating $500,000 of the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, funds for small businesses, grants in Cayuga County for businesses who have been adversely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. I think all of you saw this, went out yesterday. It hasn't been a lot of time, but Brian and I and a couple other people met yesterday, Lynn, Bob. We discussed this. We've changed Brian's original, and I think we've came up with a good agreement here. So let's, I'll move this. Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Jimmy?
So a couple quick, it looks like we're gonna have a committee that's gonna, an in-house committee that's gonna manage.
It'll be one Democrat, one Republican, and 3 hopefully business people.
And what that committee is gonna decide, Jim, is, who's gonna administrate it, how it's gonna work, what the application process is, and who the decision makers are gonna be. So I do have a recommendation for that committee, and I voiced it with the chair. And my recommendation was from one person from the community and one legislator from both sides.
So I think that's good that we're gonna have a committee. So and they'll help define, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating questions. I didn't get a chance to catch up with.
No, go ahead. I hear you, Doug.
What defines a small business too, that the committee's gonna make that up?
Yes.
So we know, and it's gonna include the farming community.
Yes.
Small farms.
Does small farms.
Yeah.
Right.
Whatever that definition is.
Yeah. And let me say this too, because we had a lot of discussions about this resolution. And one of the things is both parties came together. I had to learn a little bit more about the agricultural field. Just being a city person, I did not move out to where Elaine, I still live in the city. So I'm still learning. So I had to get some information from some community members, and I made that adjustment.
No, I think some of it looks good. I am gonna support this. I just had a couple questions.
Hans?
I'm gonna oppose this because it's discriminatory. It mentions the Republicans and Democrats. It leaves out 3 members of this group who are neither conservative or NOP.
Well, Hans, strong word, discriminatory. It was just a suggestion. I don't choose the committee, the chair of this committee. I gave a suggestion. So seeing how there was 2 majorities and caucus together, there is like some non-parties, but they do caucus with the Republicans and they caucus with the Democrats. The chair ultimately could be the only person to choose the committee. He can go totally whatever committee he chooses.
It doesn't say that in there.
No, but that's a rule. I think that's rule. Chris, is that a rule that he?
I'm looking for the words Republican or Democrat, and I guess.
I was saying, I suggested that.
It's just a suggestion. It's not in there.
Suggest.
Yeah, it's
Not in there.
So what I should have rephrased is a person from both caucuses. The committee, the chair determines who's on the committee as in any other committee form.
Can I make
Andy? Yeah.
Can I make an amendment then to add that the chairman can choose 1 member from each caucus? Add that line into the resolution with that.
Yeah.
Thank everybody.
Okay. All in, let's do that.
I'll second.
Motion. Okay, second. Discussion for the amendment. Lydia?
Oh, not for the amendment,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
No discussion for the amendment? All right, let's vote on the amendment. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, need a motion for the resolution. Second?
Second.
Discussion.
Again, I would like to, sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
I would like to mention that there are a lot of businesses that saw interruption. There were businesses who are now no longer in business and we can't help them. However, they're filing for insurance and insurance companies and the state Supreme Courts are rejecting business interruption claims. They have to go somewhere to get help or they're not going to be there to serve us forever. Like to see small businesses. Thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye. Oh, I'm sorry, Chris, I didn't see you.
That's okay. I just wanted to say I appreciate Brian did call me. We talked about this. I had a lot of questions about the details of how this is going to roll out. I was glad to hear that there's a committee that's being formed. My understanding is that whatever the program recommendations are, that's coming back to us to weigh in on feedback.
No.
That was what I was initially told.
I don't want, I'm sure everybody in here is legislators making decisions based on what businesses get grants, which ones that. I think our job is to form the committee and the committee makes a decision. I don't want to empower them by us. You know, they come with the suggestions. If they got something that's totally rogue, I'm sure the chair will be involved in bringing it to, and Mike, as well as Chris, if anything, play off the beaten path. So if I interpret that, I'm sorry. But
And I guess I'll just say, it's a very large chunk of money without having any details, so I'm not gonna be able to support it if that's the case, but I definitely appreciate you bringing this forward, and hope that the committee, will make good decisions on it. But I, personally, unless you want to appoint me to that committee right now, I can't support that right now. I have too many unanswered.
I understand. Andy, wait a minute, Brian. Andy?
So Brian called me and I have no issue with this because him and I actually discussed, you know, what he's got written down here. And I thought it was a good idea to make a committee because piggybacking on what he just said, I mean, for those of us that have been here for more than one term, yeah, I mean, it's not our job to, there's no way in hell 15 people are going to agree on everything all the time. So it's not our job to, you know, micromanage. I mean, if we form a committee, doesn't matter what it's for. That's what we form the committee for. That's why you have representation from, and I won't say both sides because I'll say both caucuses, Hans, because I'm with you on that one. But we need to, and as long as it's, you know, broad-based to the whole county, you know, the farthest up towards you, Jim, to the farthest down to the county line to Tompkins County. That's the way it should be. I mean, so every little business is, and I would hope the committee would be checking with all of the town supervisors and stuff like that to say, hey, what businesses have you seen, you know, that have struggled and need help? But
So there'll be a definite application process. Then there have to be proof loss of from COVID. So that's all that been discussed as far as the committee, right?
I just want to say one other thing, Trish. I really think that we just had a discussion about redistricting and we're talking about less government. So if the government is now deciding who's in the money, that is totally unfair to everybody. I mean, that would be a disservice. So the committee, we got to trust that the people that we choose in the committee make the right decisions. And hopefully we get the nice team together and the chair is going to choose the committee and we just hope they get it right there. But the effort to allocate money speaks volumes to not to say that we have a distrust within ourselves to even spread the money out and it's distributed. So we're going to trust the chair that he forms the right committee. I'm going to trust the committee to get out there, but the money speaks volumes to help people. And it's a large chunk of money, but people lost a large chunk of money. And like you said, there's many of these businesses are not even here because of
I appreciate that. I'm still feel the same.
Lydia?
Sir, I don't want to rebut you because you are valuable and I respect you 100%. And I know that when I hear you, there's substantiation behind your opinion. And I really respect and value that. However, I'm going to ask you to please reconsider. I hate to make comparisons, but in this case, we have given $3 million to digitize paper. And we don't even have broadband throughout the entire county so that all of our constituents can access that digitizing. We do have access to every single small business in our county. So I think that this $500,000 is well worth it.
Jim, just on this resolution. I think I'll ask it here that whoever is on the committee, make sure they communicate with the caucuses or the legislature. Let's make sure it is getting out, as Andy said, to every district and every town supervisor. It's one of the things we, as much as we think we do communicate this, it's the fact that I'm the mayor and the county legislator, that crossover of those two, I take so much back to my community that was not being heard before. And I'm sure that all the legislators are trying to reach out. But as long as that committee just gives us updates on what's going on, or, hey, you sent this out, can you check with your towns to make sure they got it? You know, it would be a good way for us to communicate with our local communities too. So I'm supportive of this.
Thank you, Mark.
We'll figure it out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I understand it, the city has allocated a similar amount of money to this same type of resolution. And as I read this resolution, it states for small businesses in Cayuga County, and I would associate Cayuga County with the city also. So my question would be, you know, is our ARPA money or this request also going to include the city as well?
So, Mark, thank you for that question, because that's a question I did want to address. So there's I believe, and we're going to guide the committee. Hopefully, my suggestion would be if somebody received money from the city, they're excluded. If they didn't apply from the city, they're excluded. So they would have to apply, and basically either the city had exhausted the funds, or they got rejected for some reason and they fell into the pool or whatever the committee decided the application process is. So the other question that I think some people are thinking, well, is there a reason why we're giving money? But Auburn pays the largest assessment values. So to disclude Auburn, the city is a lot, and also the villages got money. So they to spread that money whatever way they chose. So we can't, if we're going to want to work with the city, if we're going to want to be able to have a cohesive relationship, we can't just keep excluding Auburn when they pay the most taxes, the assessed taxes. The other point of that is if you exclude Auburn, you're making a statement that their taxes didn't matter. So what I don't see, there's no double dipping. So if you happen to help a few people in Auburn, so be it. I don't see the issue.
I would just.
No, I'm just saying, like
I'm just, my only response to that would be is, would the city be willing to reach out to the small businesses in the county also? Because the way I understand it, they made theirs exclusive to the city.
Yeah, so if you do that, then I could go to a village and say, are they reaching out to Auburn?
I have no idea.
They wouldn't do that. I mean, that wouldn't make any sense, you know? And I think that last night, when I got elected from District 15, and that is like the west end of Auburn, runs up to the center part of the city. But when I took this chair, I represent the county. I took time to learn about agriculture, which I had no clue about. I've been on one farm, leadership Cayuga, and I've learned so much about that. So my point is, I represent, and so don't you, the county. And we cannot go like this, point in both directions and say, well, you did this, you did this, you did this. What are you gonna do for this? This is the money that's going to a pool of people, a pool of businesses that represent the entire county, that all have contributed. So that's my comeback with that. So it's not a comeback, I don't mean it like that, but it's almost like, it seems to be at times when people say, we always want to work good with the cities and villages, but if we're gonna say, well, the village just got this and the city got this, what are we gonna do? So I'm hoping that, I took the time to learn, I made some adjustments, just clear out of ignorance and got educated myself. And I just hope that we can just pass this resolution unanimously because it'll send a great statement.
Trish.
Brian, you just mentioned something. So if city businesses didn't apply to the city's ARPA funding for whatever reason, which the process is closed now, they're gonna be shut out for county funding. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think that I do, and I don't know this, 'cause I don't really frequent the city, but they may open it back up.
But they've already run their process. So
We don't,
currently.
what I can tell you, Trish, is I can't tell you what the city's gonna do. I can tell you what we're gonna do. So maybe that committee could say, well, you know, why didn't you apply? Well, whatever.
This
Maybe-
is why I'm concerned about approving it tonight, because that's a rule that
But
I don't
if
like.
you go down-
And
I
we're
mean-
shutting out businesses that maybe didn't apply to the cities for whatever reason. And so I guess I just wanted to clarify that. But
Well-
there's a lot of details I think that we haven't discussed. I don't think it's micromanaging. I think it's looking at policy and how we want to spend this $500,000. I did not vote for that, for the digitization. There's reasons for that. But I definitely support our small businesses. I just think there's a lot of unanswered questions about how this is going to be managed. Even which entity is going to oversee this program, that has been all over the board. So for me, it's going to be a no vote, and we'll just let it unfold. But that's an example of something that I think these are questions the committee is going to have to figure out.
No, Andy,
respond.
And wait for Andy. He's got his hand up, right?
Sorry, okay. So I'm still good with this because I'm gonna assume committee, we'll call it committee because we don't know who's on it, is going to look at the county as a whole. They're not just gonna look at Auburn, they're gonna look at, and I'm gonna assume the qualifications are going to be, you know, you're not gonna look at a business that in Auburn, let's say, that lost $2,000 and you got a business in wherever, north, south end, that's, you know, surviving by their shoestrings. I would think the committee would be smart enough to say they need it first, not the one in Auburn, and vice versa. If there's an established business in Auburn, I mean, I have faith enough that the committee is not going to spend all $500,000 in Auburn, nor are they going to spend all $500,000 throughout the rest of the county. Because let's face it, $500,000 is a drop in the bucket. I mean, if you got, you know, I mean,
I agree.
We're gonna do what we can do, but we can also beat this dead horse for another couple months, and meantime, we might lose another business or two that's hanging on by their shoestrings. So
I want to piggyback on a little bit what Trish said. We talked about redistricting tonight, and we talked about, you know, management style, and we're talking about the SARP fund. Could you imagine if we, all 15 of us was in a room deciding every little detail? It would be impossible. I think that we had to have the faith and the trust in our people that were in there. We wouldn't go and manage economic development and get in there and every detail has to be laid out. It's not for us to decide. It's for them to decide. And we're never going to iron out all the details. So I think that this is one of the times where you get Annie and I agreeing on something. It's almost. This is.
I'll yell at you on the way out.
Gonna walk out.
Jim, go ahead.
I guess to try to move this on and get to a vote, I'll ask the chair that once the committee's selected and stuff, and they set up their standard of rules, if it would make the legislators feel any better to see how they're gonna disseminate that information and what an application looks like and what the criteria is gonna be like.
That at all.
That they review it in front of the legislature before it goes out. So we can comment on it. If any particular legislator, I think, you know, would want to mark up an application or comment, like, just like we do with any of this other legislation.
Well, that's one reason I wanted one from each caucus to take it back to the caucus and keep them updated. So
Swan, I don't know the question. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I like the way that this is looking right now because it leaves it, but we just saying we're setting aside the sum and that we're having a committee. I'm assuming you'll come back with the details and we'll get to hear about them, but I'm glad that we're not trying to iron it all out on the simple resolution. I like the way that it is simple. And I think a lot of thought will go into it. I think even some ideas that you might have as the architect of this probably will morph and change and evolve anyway, as the process gets underway. So I think it would be very hard to articulate exactly this process, but I'm very happy to be able to support this tonight. I even wish it was more money, so.
Okay, I want to thank Brian for meeting with me yesterday and going through this because we both gave and took, and that's what it's all about. So thank you for your cooperation. Okay, we've already got a first and a second. We've already discussed. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay. Carried. We got one more resolution. Bobby, you want to read it?
Mr. Chairman, I forgot what the resolution was. No, I'm just. Last, but certainly not least. I have a resolution before me. I'm presenting advocating for maintaining a 60-hour work week for seasonal workers. It's in support of our local farms and the workers themselves because they want to work. They want to work a lot. So I felt compelled to bring this before the legislature in hopes that they'll support it and keep New York farms strong and healthy and support the migrant workers.
I'll move it.
Second.
Third.
Discussion.
I knew it was in there somewhere.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Bobby.
Brian's got me flustered.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you, everybody. Long but a good one.
Thanks, Chris.